Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Katie Pavlich, Juan Williams, Congressman Jason Chaffetz, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Nine victims remain hospitalized, 4 in critical condition, following the deadliest terror attack in New York City since 9/11. 8 killed and a dozen injured by a jihadi who mowed them down with a truck and then shouted, Allahu Akbar. We have more information today about the suspect, his motive, and how he came to America. The immigrant from Uzbekistan was allowed into the country in 2010 on a diversity visa. President Trump now vowing to end the lottery program.
I am today starting the process of terminating the diversity lottery program. Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it, getting rid of it. We want a merit-based program where people come into our country based on merit.
More now from Catherine Herridge, our chief intelligence correspondent in Washington. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Dan. This afternoon, Homeland Security officials confirmed to Fox News that the suspect was admitted under a valid visa for the program in March of 2010, and that the program does require an interview with the State Department and additional screening. As you just mentioned, President Trump said he is in the process of terminating the program because he favors a merit-based approach, not a program like the lottery that traditionally tilts in favor of countries with historically low rates of immigration. We learned today the suspect was among the maximum 50,000 people allowed into the U.S. every year under the State Department program, and about 24,000 people have entered the U.S. from the country of Uzbekistan since 2005, and that's where the suspect was born. Also today, 2 sources telling Fox News that the suspect had connections to individuals who were already known to law enforcement. At that New York City briefing earlier today, the Deputy Commissioner for Counterterrorism explained the suspect was running with a very suspicious crowd. Meantime, new photos obtained by Fox News give you a better sense of New Jersey's Omar Mosque and the focus of multiple leads after 9/11. The suspect's brick apartment building is virtually on its doorstep. You see it right there with the mosque, the white building in the distance. A former federal investigator with Pentbomb, that's the code name for the 9/11 file, said the area is about 4 to 5 blocks from 9/11 hijacker and ringleader Mohammed Atta's apartment, as well as where the Mosul hijackers were located, and they finalized the 2001 plot. So this area remains really very much a nest, as it was described to us, or an enclave for radical teachings. Dana.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much. The president has directed Homeland Security to ramp up extreme vetting of foreigners in the wake of the attack.
We have to get much tougher. We have to get much smarter. And we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything. And that's not only our country, that's other countries too that are having very similar problems. And we have to get tough, we have to get smart, we have to do what's right to protect our citizens.
Greg, it's interesting that he brings that up today because Pew Research Poll had a poll out today that said 71% of Americans are concerned about how politically correct America has become.
Well, you know, we talk about political opportunism, but the real political opportunism after terrorism is the application of Islamophobia. If anybody expresses concern over radical Islam, you get in trouble. And there's this conflict now where you have the mayor and you have the governor saying there are 8 million people in New York City. There's a million pair of eyes. If you see something, say something. But you can't say something in this current climate because you will lose your job. If this guy was already on our radar, he was interviewed by the feds in 2015 because he had links online to certain kinds of bad groups. But why didn't they go after him? Maybe they were scared that they were going to lose their job. They're going to lose their job. And this is how everybody feels. I'm tired of this hypocrisy where they say, if you see something, say something, because they really don't want you to do anything. Right. Because the moment you do something, you are labeled Islamophobic. You're labeled a bigot. So if you look at what Trump does, the media does this. The leaders do it about Islamophobia. He doesn't. He's the closest to the ground of any president I've ever seen talking about the actual sincere fears of the average citizen. There are things that I know I'm not going to like his tax plan. I don't understand his 401k stuff. It's going to drive me crazy. But his response, and this is the most important thing, his response to the presence of terror is so much more important to the reaction after terror. When you see Cuomo and you see Mayor de Blasio and everybody else saying how strong New York is and how we're going to have that parade, who cares? It's about your response before the attack, your willingness to admit that there is the presence of terror before terror strikes. It's no good afterwards to give sympathy after it's happened. It doesn't matter. What matters is having the guts to say, it's here. How do we get rid of it? And then you get targeted for Islamophobia. So it takes guts to say what he is saying. To talk about the diversity visa is important. Diversity untethered to merit is of no value.
And remember, it was just a few years ago that I think it was the Associated Press went after the NYPD for monitoring these mosques, including that one that Catherine Herridge was just pointing out.
The best example, Nidal Hassan. Mm-hmm. They knew about him. Yep. Nobody said anything at Fort Hood.
President Trump also today, Juan, pointed out immediately early this morning that Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, had supported diversity visas. He didn't point out that Chuck Schumer had also voted to change that program, even though that bill didn't get to the president's desk under President Obama. Listen to some of the Democrats responding to Trump.
Look, the last thing the president or anyone else should do is politicize this tragedy.
I don't think this is the time to get political. There's no doubt that we have to be smarter and have more intelligence. But there's also no doubt that this is not the time to play politics. This is not the time to foment hate.
All President Trump does is take advantage, horrible advantage, of a tragedy and try to politicize and divide. The American people long for leadership, not divisiveness, not finger-pointing, not name-calling. This is a tragedy.
Your thoughts, Juan?
Well, I don't think there's any question from Chuck Schumer's point of view. This is a tragedy. This is his home state. This is New York City. I think where I would differ from Greg is I think that when you say, let's go forward with the Halloween parade, let's continue to live our lives, or in the language of President Bush, let's not let the terrorists win through intimidation. I think that's a very important message. Now, when you're talking about something like prevention, I don't think there's any question that our country has taken logical steps to what we call hardened targets, to make it more difficult to go through the airport, to get a visa. President Trump's talking about extreme vetting. It takes 2 years if you're a Syrian refugee. We have extreme measures ready in place. I want to know what he's going to do to make it more extreme.
But
that
I'm
would
talking
be
about
news
saying
to me.
something. I think there's some hypocrisy.
That's fine, but
you're telling citizens to say something and then you punish them.
I don't think so at all. In fact, I think the contrary is the case. I think you have people, including me, who said something.
That's what I'm saying.
But guess what? When you say something these days, I think there are lots of people like Greg who would say, "Thank God somebody stood up and said something."
I don't.
And I think the police, by the way, are very appreciative of informants, and they have many informants in these very mosques that they have been surveilling. That's another example of the fact that it's not like we're a bunch of oafs who've never taken any steps to protect ourselves. We have people who are surveilling the mosque, and then the question becomes a much more difficult question for you as a libertarian about privacy and rights of private worship.
He has no problem there.
I have no problem.
Well, but I'm saying for the American Constitution,
security
there's a problem.
Freedom.
It is true that when people say something to authorities, they are automatically presumed to be Islamophobic. We're not even allowed to talk about what Catherine Herridge discussed as a nest of jihadists, because that would be going after a Muslim American community of immigrants, and therefore you are bigoted and don't want more people to come into the country. The left is making two different arguments here. The first is that you have to choose between proper vetting, more vetting of people, foreigners coming into the country, or nothing at all because you would be bigoted to do so and you're going after minorities as a result. The second thing they're saying is, well, it's on the American people and the country to be more welcoming to particularly Islamic immigrants who come to this country, because if you aren't, then they're not going to assimilate, and therefore they may go into terror and turn to terror, as if that is a justification for something like this happening. We don't owe them anything. They owe America a lot.
Jason, before I go to you, just a note that the U.S. Attorney of New York is going to hold a press conference later this hour. They will be announcing terrorism charges against the suspect. So we'll bring that to you live. It will be later in this hour, so don't miss that. Jason, your thoughts?
But I think Greg is absolutely right. What does it mean to actually be on a watch list? Because nobody's really actually watching them. If you think that they're actually watching them, what they're doing, where they're surfing the internet, they're not doing anything.
Well, it does
they're
take
on a
something
list.
like 14 NYPD or intelligence officials per one guy that they're watching. So we have a resource problem, possibly.
Well, but Homeland Security funding has actually gone up, despite what Senator
Chuck
Schumer said.
was saying, but that number was just cut in the budget that the Republicans just passed.
Absolutely wrong, because what happened was the appropriations went up. They actually went from $47.8 billion to $49.3 billion, and the appropriation for 2018 is $51.1 billion.
Is that enough?
He wordsmithed it. He tried to say, well, the proposed budget, but what was actually appropriated went up. So he knows what he's doing.
So he won.
No, he was getting his word out there, but he didn't have much policy to stand on. The thing that bothers me is if you go back to the Boston bombing, and this is part of what Greg's point is, we didn't do anything. Now, I introduced a bill to actually do some things with asylum seekers who violate this and actually go back to their country of origin, back and forth. This country still today does not have an entry-exit program. I can go down and buy a sandwich at my Gandolfo's place and get a turkey sandwich, and the 10th time I do it, I get a free one because they know if I've come and gone to their shop. If you go and leave this country and come back, we don't know. This person today, I promise you, nobody can definitively tell you if he actually left the country.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
And that's current law.
But here's the thing. This guy came here, and he was vetted as part of the program, and apparently no alarm bells went off, right?
So they did, though. They did all over the place.
Not at all. And so here's the thing. He was led to this horrible act by something that happened while he was in the United States. And this is what we really need to talk about.
But he was on a
and where was he hanging out in the United States?
He was on the watch list because of association with those other folks.
Now, where was he hanging out? In a mosque that was preaching radical ideology. That's where he was hanging out.
My point to you is, I think that this took place online. The conversion to radical Islam took place online. And unless we get away from what I think is a distraction and one that's, I think, politically advantageous to President Trump to talk about, oh, we need to vet more, we need to stop. None of the people on his Muslim ban list, none of them, including this event, would have been stopped by his Muslim ban.
But the point, you said that there weren't any red flags at all. There absolutely were. The mosque that he went to.
That's after he came into the country.
You said there was not. You think that this all happened online, which he was radicalized.
I'm saying most of this whole thing about trucks. Look at Nice, right? Look at what happened in Times Square 5 months ago. They're using vehicles as weapons of destruction.
But you specifically said when he came here, something happened. He was living in America to make him do this. Yeah. So if you look at everything around him, the people he was hanging out with, which, by the way, he has friends, one of which the FBI believes is a terrorist who is missing now in the United States. He was going to a mosque that was under FBI surveillance. And this was happening online, which they clearly did not catch. He did the exact playbook as the NYPD
because
says.
we do have additional information. The FBI now is saying that they are seeking information on a second person they believe was involved in this attack.
And, okay, that flies in the face. We keep talking about online recruitment, which is true. But we also have to admit the fact that they have friends and that they have relatives. And we've had two examples. The Boston bombing were brothers. And in San Bernardino, it was a husband and wife. So we have to understand that this is a family thing. It's a tribal thing. It's one person, it's an ideology. So it infects a lot of different people. My last point is, it is a coincidence that this happened on Halloween. But there's a metaphor there that has been used before, that when your kids come home with a bag of candy, the parents vet it. They go through it. They make sure nothing bad's in there because they took something outside and they brought it inside, and the parents go through it and they look through it. And that's not absurd. To do that is not absurd. It's what a parent does. Applying that logic right now in a changing world, when the outside is coming in with a pernicious ideology, the razor blade in the apple is radical Islam. You have every right to vet.
But why do you think we don't do it?
I'm going to have to get in one more thing because they keep telling me some more information. So remember that within this hour, the U.S. attorney will have a press conference. They will announce charges against the suspect. Sources are saying that the suspect does not show remorse for the attack. that he is being cooperative. So that possibly could be the reason the FBI is seeking information about a second person. So we're going to have all of that for you in this hour. He may have acted alone, but all indications are the New York City terror suspect was inspired by ISIS. So how do we fight this new front in the war on terror? We'll be right back.
This is a Fox News alert. New York's governor has described the New York terror suspect as a likely lone wolf. But now the FBI is seeking information on a second person, this man, also from Uzbekistan. More on that in a moment. Yesterday's Halloween attack bears the hallmarks of ISIS. Many radical Islamic fanatics are following a playbook. Here's the House Homeland Security Committee chair with more on this concerning trend.
This is what the FBI and NYPD call flash to bang. These cases can happen so fast. One person radicalizing very quickly and then killing 8 people. And it's probably the hardest thing to stop. A larger scale operation like the 9/11 plot, we could probably very likely stop today. This is the case that worries us the most.
You know, Dana, flash to bang. It makes you think, gosh, well, how are we going to stop this? I mean, you get somebody like this. Suddenly he's radicalized and commits an act that kills 8 people.
Well, in the commercial break, we were able to get some additional information. So he is interviewed by the FBI, inspired by ISIS videos that he watched on his cell phone for about a year. And it was about 2 months ago, apparently, that he decided to use the truck. He was inspired by videos by al-Baghdadi. He's the ISIS imam that everybody tries to follow and emulate. He says he chose Halloween because he thought there would be more pedestrians. And then his goal was to continue down the West Side Highway to the Brooklyn Bridge to inflict even more damage and harm. So we have a lot more information, then we'll have the press conference in a bit.
Congressman, one of the things that I think lots of people around the world are concerned about right now is that as the United States and our allies are defeating ISIS on the battlefield, you have people who were fighters there who are now returning home or going elsewhere or seeking to radicalize people in other countries to mount attacks like the one we saw yesterday.
Well, again, going back to my point, we still don't have in this country an entry-exit program. So if somebody did leave the United States, go over there and come back, we don't know that. The second part is I think Governor Cuomo was terribly misleading. He went out and said there was no evidence now that this was part of a larger conspiracy, a larger plot. Authorities knew almost immediately. He left a note on in the truck saying this is part of ISIS. This is a very big attack on the United States of America.
That is the largest plot.
This is not a lone. This is not a lone wolf. This whole idea, anybody who's out there saying, "Oh, this is some lone wolf," I think the actual legitimate definition of a lone wolf is what happened in Las Vegas. But we figured out more about this person in the first hour or two than we have what happened in Las Vegas. And
a little bit earlier today. First of all, that means that we need to know who's coming in out of the country, as you said. But also, what does that mean for the war coming back home? The government keeps saying they're going to come back. We're going to see more of these attacks at home. Well, we had the See Something, Say Something program after 9/11. We implemented a whole bunch of different ways that people could spot terrorism after 9/11. Things have changed. Their tactics have changed. And so I think that they need to make it clear to people, what do you do when you see someone like this acting like this? What happens if you see someone watching these videos on their phone? And how do you react if you see someone walking or running down the street with a truck? And are there ways that you can be vigilant in your everyday behavior that don't make you paranoid, but make you actually just more aware of what you're doing during the day?
And there's steps that people can take. And by the way, at 5:30, the hero cop who stopped this attack is going to have a press conference, his first words on this, and we will carry it live. Greg, I wanted to go to something Katie was talking about, which are steps that we could take logically. So people are talking about things like tighter controls on rental vehicles, right?
Right.
Or electronic surveillance, better electronic surveillance. Again, coming back to what Katie was talking about, he's watching, or you saying that Dana saying he was watching videos on his cell phone. And then, of course, you could say, what about limiting the internet, like stopping certain things on the internet? Does that take us towards stopping it, or does it impinge on our civil rights liberties in this country.
Well, it would be nice to see some of the companies that are making billions and billions of dollars in this arena to actually have some personal responsibility about what is out there. But, it does show you that this person followed instructions, which means that the ideology actually leaps oceans. A wall can't stop this. So I think one of the ways is to change the frame of mind is that you have to untether this simply from a religious aspect, because that's what's hamstringing our media. Whenever you want to pre-plan against terror, you are Islamophobic. So if you were to see this as a brain contaminating disease, which is what it is, it's a it turns people into homicidal zombies. If you look at it that way, the first thing you think about is quarantine. Find out who these people are, quarantine them, and talk to their families and their relatives. And if this is what it is, they got to go. That's how you do it. But if it's tethered to religion, it's a bad thing. The other thing we have to talk about is that these truck attacks are common, but it's going to get worse. My worry is that there's going to be a worse method of attack that will marry technology and terror. What we're talking about is terror change. Every year there is terror change, an increase in proficiency in killing. If the media cared as much about terror change as climate change, we'd be a lot better off. So people have to be looking at this in a different way, not as something that it conflates with Islam, which is what the media does, not with the people who are fighting this thing. It's the media that conflates it with Islam, which then paralyzes people from actually thinking about what to do.
All right. Well, we have so much to talk about here, but much more to come on The Five. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is a Fox News Alert. We are continuing our coverage of the aftermath of the deadly New York City terror attack. We are awaiting 2 press conferences. Any minute now, we will hear from the hero NYPD officer Ryan Nash. He's credited with stopping the suspected terrorist, opening fire, bringing down the dirtbag before he could do any more harm. The second press conference happening this hour from the U.S. Attorney's Office, who will announce terrorism charges against the dirtbag seen here. So,
apparently the dirtbag asked for ISIS flags in his hospital room.
Yes, isn't that nice?
What a jerk.
That's got to make everybody waiting on him feel really good.
Just take his morphine away for a few hours. Just for a couple hours. Take it away.
I am worried that the U.S. Attorney is going to come out and offer charges. I'm with Lindsey Graham on this. I really do think you should be taken to Guantanamo Bay. I think the suspect in the Benghazi attack should have also been taken to Guantanamo Bay. I've been down there a couple times, and I'm telling you, they can do a lot more surveilling and watching that person without reading him his Miranda rights.
I disagree because. Well, one, I don't know if it will pass, because if it would pass muster. He's a legal U.S. president.
We're going to the press conference.
Quiet,
Dana, please.
I have really good points. Stick around.
Let's go to it.
Hello. Thank you for coming. My name is Officer Ryan Nash. I appreciate the public recognition of the actions of myself and my fellow officers yesterday. Although I feel that we were just doing our job, like thousands of officers do every day, I understand the importance of yesterday's events and the role we played, and I'm grateful for the recognition we have received. I just want to thank my family and friends for their support and all the responding officers who assisted me. However, due to the nature of the pending criminal case, I cannot make any further public statements about the incident at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
That was Ryan Nash. This morning, the New York City mayor, de Blasio, seemed so surprised by the officers' actions. It was like he suddenly woke to the vital importance of gratitude to the police, especially, I guess, when his election is next week, Juan.
I don't get it why you attack de Blasio so constantly.
I can't help it. I can't stand him.
I must say,
I'm petty about that.
Living in New York City and Washington, D.C., I think we have so much in the way of conscientious, hardworking cops and security.
Absolutely.
I don't get it.
De Blasio wasn't that crazy about the cops.
Well, I'm just telling you, he's the mayor, and the cops, we have more cops now in New York than ever.
And they're having to do a lot more than ever because of all of his actions.
I think
they cut the number of cops?
No.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Brain Room, get on that.
All right, get on.
But he also said that he was very proud that they still attended the parade. But the only way you could attend the parade is because the law enforcement is there to protect you.
Go ahead.
I think Ryan Nash, maybe you should write in Ryan Nash for mayor.
Yeah,
the mayor of New York City.
That would be
I love
amazing.
that. You know, I love ordinary Americans who do extraordinary things. That guy goes to work. He doesn't know this is going to happen. That moment is there, and boom, he took him down so fast. And I love this guy.
You know what was good about it? He didn't kill him.
And also, he was on his way to deal with an emotionally disturbed individual. Mm-hmm. And so that's what a lot of these officers
That wasn't
are
me,
doing.
by the way.
It wasn't Greg.
I mean, I do live in that neighborhood, but it's amazing. They're unassuming, Katie.
They're humble. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy's humility there, after now overnight, he's become a hero to so many. Imagine if this guy hadn't been stopped and he went around doing God knows what for how long. And he thanks his fellow first responders, says, look, I don't want to be in the public eye. There's an ongoing criminal investigation like a professional, and moves along. But you're right about Bill de Blasio. This is the same guy who said that, you know, his son has to be afraid of police officers because inherently they're all racist, right? So
He didn't
it's
say
good.
that.
He absolutely did.
No, he said that he has the same conversation so many black parents have with their kids, which is when
He
you deal
warned
with
his
cops,
son because he
be
thinks,
careful.
he believes that all police officers
That's not
are
what he
inherently
said.
racist, and
No,
therefore
that's your
his
assumption. You're saying that's
biracial son
implicit.
has to be
They turned
worried
their
about
backs
walking down
on
the
him.
street. They turned their backs on
Cops
him.
did.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was fair. Let me tell you something. I've had that conversation with my sons about where you keep your hands and understanding.
I've had
the
that
nervousness.
conversation too.
Oh, okay. So then what are you blaming de Blasio for?
Because my parents don't think that all cops are racist.
I don't
They
think
just
that
think you
either.
obey the law.
Dana,
Can I go back to make my good points?
Sure.
Yes.
Because I know I respect Lindsey Graham's idea, and I understand what he was thinking. I just think that it is not a good one. First of all, because he's a U.S. legal resident, I think that the Supreme Court would have to hear it, and I think this court would actually grant him habeas. But at the same time, New York City, the United States, but especially New York City, has a near 100% conviction rate. And if he becomes an enemy combatant, anything that they have gotten from him in the last 48 hours, it's not admissible later on. So I would just let New York City deal
Well,
with it.
we don't know when he was read his Miranda rights, if he did read his Miranda rights. And there's a reason why we have Guantanamo Bay. And there's a reason why we're able to extract so much information in that setting. He's not a United States citizen. And this is
But
specific
he does have but he is going to be granted habeas corpus rights under the Constitution because he's a legal permanent resident,
This
even
is
though
going
he's
to be
not a citizen.
This is going to be an interesting political conversation over the next 3 years, really, as President Trump deals with more of these things, God forbid, because the Obama administration was roundly criticized for treating situations like this in a criminal way, a law enforcement way, rather than a wartime way. And it's going to be interesting to watch and see what the Justice Department under the Trump administration does in that aspect.
All right, let's do a generic tease.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
This is a Fox News alert. You're looking live at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Lower Manhattan, New York City. The U.S. Attorney is about to announce a federal terrorism charges against the suspect in yesterday's deadly attack, and we will bring that to you as it happens. But in the meantime, a look now at the liberal media's coverage of the new radical Islamist attack on our homeland. This CNN reporter stunningly chose to keep the Muslim suspect's ethnicity and physical features secret from viewers yesterday.
Police know who he is. They have a description of him. I'm not going to share that at the moment.
Jake Tapper, also from CNN, felt the need to remind viewers how beautiful the phrase Allah Akbar can be.
The Arabic chant, Allah Akbar, God is great, sometimes said under the most beautiful of circumstances, and too often we hear of it being said in moments like this.
And over at MSNBC, this analyst wants you to know that sometimes Christians are responsible for terror too.
What you're seeing is not Islam whatsoever. None of this is condoned, including the, sacrificing and getting yourself killed at the end of a terrorist attack. None of that is Islamic. It's anti-Islamic. Even Christians, we've seen Catholics in Canada who converted to quote-unquote Islam and then carried out acts of terror.
I know these reporters are doing this spontaneously at the moment, but this is not a bunch of Catholics gone crazy. These aren't Mormons out doing all this stuff. And it's not just Buddhists gone wild. There is a trend here, and there are a lot of good quality people. I have Muslim friends. The overwhelming majority of Muslims don't do this, but there is this radical element that does do that. And we have to be honest about who they are and what they're doing. Juan, would you agree with that, or do you buy into this notion that we need
politically correct guy, but I am against stereotypes and discrimination. As you said, I don't think that most Muslims are up to terrorism, but I think there is, if I'm an investigator, a concrete link if you look at a pattern. And I think that's what you do if you're an intelligent person. You try to discern a pattern, because what we want to do is prevent this from happening again. The question is, are you being effective, or are you just playing politics? If you look, Greg was saying earlier to me, he said, hey, a lot of people are PC. They don't want to talk about Islam in this context. And why maybe what we should do is move away from Islam and just say it's a cult. And people act crazy in this cult, and let's go after them there. But you know what? I look at President Trump and I say, oh, Trump introduces a ban that everybody interprets 3 courts now as a ban on, guess what, Muslims. And that then, of course, introduced, and people say, well, you can't do that. That's not in keeping with our constitutional protections. But I don't think it was necessarily a bad idea, per se, if you're saying, let's look at the pattern. But it's just that, as in the case of this diversity program, I think it's 50,000 visas, Katie. 50,000, right? That's like, in terms of green cards, that's nothing.
You only need one.
That's right.
In all those clips, they are unconsciously paralyzed by phobia, the fear of being seen as Islamophobic. And the direct result of phobia is that you actually think that the aftermath of a terror attack is worse than the terror attack. It's like the first thought when the bodies hit the ground are, oh, they're going to be mad at the Muslims. So that's a strange place to go, because irrational anger over Muslims now takes priority over carnage. But the carnage has already happened. The irrational anger hasn't yet. That leads to more terror attacks, because you're denying the reality of these actual attacks, prevents you from thinking about preventing these attacks. And it all goes back to the pernicious identity politics.
Right.
Are guilty. We are guilty. Americans are guilty for being bigots and racists. And this is just our way, through Islamophobia, of expressing that again.
I don't understand how.
Vegas, did you have it? I think everybody in this room thought, is this Islamic terror?
Right.
Then it turns out not to be Islamic terror. Do you then leap, Greg, to a conclusion, oh, well, gee, we got to watch out for white guys?
I think we got to watch out for people like that guy. There are people like that. But what was interesting is that what we do, I would say we as libertarians, conservatives, maybe, I don't know, normal people, we focus on the actor, on the agent of mayhem. What happens after Vegas, they focused on the tool, not the guy. They focused on the gun. We focus on the agent of mayhem, whether it's the guy in Vegas or the guy in New York. We know we go after the agent who committed it.
And the individual responsible, right? So I don't understand why bringing in the vast majority of Muslims is even relevant to the conversation. Why is that even something that is part of the talking right now? And that doesn't allow us to actually get to the issue, and it's a distraction from getting at the issue of actually solving the problem, right? But who has appointed all of these media people and these pundits as experts on what Islam is? I know an expert on Islam. His name is al-Baghdadi, and he's the ISIS leader, and he has a PhD in Islamic studies from the Islamic University in Baghdad. So if we're going to talk about experts, I think that when you look at this guy who, as we know now, was inspired by al-Baghdadi directly on his cell phone. Want to talk about what Islam is teaching? Maybe you should look at who he was inspired by, who has a PhD in Islamic studies.
You don't think that's an extremist? That's like saying Jim Jones.
He is an extremist, but what I'm saying is all of these media pundits are acting like regular everyday Americans who want to acknowledge that there is a problem are called Islamophobic if they point out that this is the guy who is teaching these things over the internet, inspiring people in the United States to carry out attacks against innocent Americans. He's the one teaching this. So where's the reform there? Why are we talking about the irrelevance of all these other people who have nothing to do with this?
No, I'm just saying to you that if you pick, let's say I mentioned Jim Jones, who was the guy who had that Christian cult.
Did Jim Jones have a caliphate with thousands of fighters in the Middle
I don't
East?
know how many people he killed. Where did he kill all those people down in Guyana, right? Yeah. So I mean, you have.
He wasn't attacking. I don't want to get into that analogy anyway, but he wasn't attacking innocent people and inspiring thousands of attacks around the world. It was a completely separate situation.
But you do have to understand the situation and who's there. Now, there are 23 people that are evidently were brought in part because he was brought in to
chain migration.
Chain migration. I want to see them all deported. I think that would actually hit their family and would catch the attention and actually serve a really good purpose. But
now that clip is now going to be played on the other network saying how extreme that is. But I do think it's worth looking about chain migration and all of this. I think that actually there is bipartisan agreement on wanting to relook at these visa programs.
What Jason said sounds controversial. Not if you talk to people that have been in the military that work with Muslims in Afghanistan and whatnot, and they talk about how family-driven they are, and if they know that their family could be affected by this, the chain migration of 21 or 22 people going back, that might actually impact them, and it creates a ripple effect in the communities. This family's affected, then this family's affected, then this family affected. It's not controversial to say, if you're going to screw your family over, it doesn't mean hurting your family. It means that the family they could lose everything. They could go back to Afghanistan or Pakistan.
We don't trust that family because guess what? If this suspect did what he did and he killed those 8 people and he was trying to cause chaos and terror, guess what? I don't trust his family. And they're all going to pay a price, and that will create a deterrent moving forward.
Well, what I was going to say is that I do think they call it a lottery for a reason. It's because it's a literal lottery, like it's a chance, but it's also like if you get a chance to come to the United States of America, that you have absolutely won the lottery. We all did. We were born here. We benefit so much because we're here. We're in this free country. I think what Jake Tapper was saying, I understand. He was talking about these radicals are perverting the religion of Islam, and it's hurting those innocent people.
Jake is not a soft target. I mean, he talks tough on this stuff. So.
Yeah, so I could understand that, but I do think it's important that we don't talk about the suspect as deranged or mentally ill. He is evil, and this is about good versus evil. It's not about religions versus religions.
Right, absolutely.
He is evil, and we're going to have a press conference coming up. Stay tuned, and we'll bring that press conference to you.
This is a Fox News alert. You're looking live at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Lower Manhattan, New York. The U.S. Attorney is about to announce federal terrorism charges against the suspect in yesterday's deadly attack. It should start any minute, so we'll bring it to you as it happens. And next, we actually have some new information in on some of the suspect's cell phones that were collected as evidence when the FBI had searched his belongings in his home. One of the cell phones, stand by, the U.S. Attorney is now giving his press conference.
Good evening. My name is June Kim. I am the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Yesterday afternoon, a man consumed by hate and a twisted ideology attacked our country and our city, using a rented Home Depot truck as his weapon of terror. The man sped down West Side Highway and then intentionally plowed his truck into a pedestrian walkway and bicycle path, hitting and running over people who were simply trying to enjoy a sunny afternoon in New York City. He killed 8 innocent human beings and injured at least a dozen other people. That man, as alleged in the complaint filed today, was Sayfullo Saipov. Today, thanks to the incredible work of the FBI, the NYPD, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and law enforcement in the city and around the country, just about 24 hours after Saipov's attack, we now have him charged with federal crimes of terrorism. The complaint filed today charges Saipov with 2 counts. First, material support of a terrorist organization, that being ISIS. And second, a federal charge of violence and destruction of a motor vehicle with willful disregard for the safety of human life that resulted in multiple deaths. As the complaint alleges, after speeding through the walkway and bicycle paths, running over and killing people, Saipov crashed his truck into a school bus carrying children. Then he got out, yelled, "Allahu Akbar," meaning God is great, brandishing two weapons, which turned out to be a paintball gun and a pellet gun. He was ultimately stopped by a brave police officer, Ryan Nash, who confronted him and shot him in the abdomen. In the short time since this attack, as alleged in the complaint, we have developed evidence establishing that Saipov committed this attack in support of ISIS. That evidence is laid out in the complaint, but it includes the following: a note that was recovered just outside the truck that read, in part, "No God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet," and Islamic supplication, "It will endure," a phrase commonly used to refer to ISIS. Also, a search of cell phones found in a bag that he was carrying, a search conducted pursuant to court-authorized wiretaps, revealed thousands of ISIS-related images and about 90 videos depicting, among other things, ISIS fighters killing prisoners by running over them with a tank, beheading them, and shooting them in the face. In Mirandized interview statements with law enforcement last night and today, Saipov allegedly admitted that he was inspired to commit the attack by the ISIS videos he watched and had been planning this attack for 2 months. He also admitted that he had rented a truck on October 22nd to practice the turns he would make on his Halloween Day attack. As I mentioned, it is incredible investigative work that has allowed us to bring these charges so soon after the attacks. I want to thank all the law enforcement and citizens who responded to this attack in the way New Yorkers do. In particular, I want to thank Officer Ryan Nash for his selfless bravery. I want to thank the FBI, represented here today by Bill Sweeney, Assistant Director in charge of the New York Field Office. Their work in this case, as in all terrorism matters that we've worked with them on, has been extraordinary. I also want to thank the NYPD, represented here today by First Deputy Commissioner Benjamin Tucker and Deputy Commissioner John Miller. Continuing to live our lives. Finally, I want to thank the terrorism prosecutors and investigators in my office who jumped on this immediately and haven't gotten any sleep since. AUSA's Andrew Beatty, Amanda Hull, Matthew LaRoche, who are not here because they're in court at the presentment, and investigators Kevin Song and George Corey, as well as the supervisors of our terrorism and international narcotics unit who are here with me, Sean Buckley and Elon Graff. The folks in that unit, working with the FBI, the NYPD, the JTTF, have a long and unblemished track record of successfully investigating and prosecuting domestic and international terrorists, whether it's the Chelsea bomber, just convicted a few weeks ago on all counts, who will be serving mandatory life in prison, or the other terrorists convicted in our courthouse just down the street in the last few years alone. That list includes the recent convictions by this office after the trial of Salman Abu Ghaith, Osama bin Laden's son-in-law, Abu Hamza, the United Kingdom-based radical cleric, Ahmed al-Gamal, the homegrown ISIS supporter, and Khalid al-Fawaz, one of al-Qaeda's embassy bombing defendants. It is an amazing record of success. Of the 8 innocent people Saipov allegedly killed yesterday, 2 were Americans, and the rest were foreigners visiting. celebrating a high school reunion. Those Argentinian men came here, like the millions of other visitors, to see the sights and spend some time in the greatest city on earth. For the same reasons that millions visit this city and find it so special, alleged terrorists like Saipov view the city as a prime target for their hate-filled crimes. But the thing is, for the alleged terrorists like Saipov, they will find in New York City something else: justice. They will find and have found that law enforcement and everyday people in this city are not afraid of their evil. They see through their false, hateful rhetoric and are committed to bringing them to justice. And that is what we intend to do with Sayfullo Saipov. I'd like to bring to the stand now Bill Sweeney, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI.
Thanks, June. Good evening. For the past 24 hours, hundreds of personnel from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, both on this side of the river and in New Jersey, have been working around the clock, developing and tracking leads and executing searches as we dig deeper into the life and motivations of Saipov. The charges announced this evening, while significant, should be taken as no indication that our work here is over. We will continue to employ all investigative techniques necessary to fully understand his social network and to unearth his motivations. Rest assured, we will not stop until every last lead has been covered. I do have one recent update I'd like you to make you aware of. Earlier, as we came in this evening, we were seeking information about an individual. Many of you in this room received that alert. We are no longer seeking that individual. We believed he had information related to yesterday, but we are not looking for that individual any longer. I would encourage anybody who believes they knew Mr. Saipov or has information about yesterday to proactively contact law enforcement. A reminder to the public that the tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI with information that may help us in any way. We also have a link set up where you can upload any photos, any videos you may think are relevant. That link is fbi.gov/NYC Tribeca. The NYPD also has their tip line set up at 1-800-577-TIPS. Following the Chelsea attacks in September of last year, I highlighted the importance of an engaged public. Today is no different. I cannot overstate the critical role the public plays in combating these threats. Please remain engaged, be aware, and immediately report suspicious activity to the authorities. In closing, I'd like to thank the partners, especially the hundreds of men and women working on the JTTF, represented by at least 50 agencies on this side of the river alone. Your work has been exceptional. I'd like to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office, June, your team, Ben, Commissioner O'Neill, John Miller, the Fire Commissioner, Dan Nigro, and George Beach from the State Police. The work your men and women have done has been absolutely extraordinary. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Now I'd like to bring to the podium First Deputy Commissioner Benjamin Tucker.
Good evening. Today's announcement